Well, I'm learning while I do these videos. If anybody hasn't figured that out by now, you haven't been watching them. But I'm going to go deeper into Pathmapper. I think this is another thing that you've got to visualize what's happening. And I'll try and explain this. I've got some examples here of going through a kind of grafted cube. You're going to use a Pathmapper when you get into 3 dimensions. You can do well with all the other tools while you move around information on a 2D grid. But when you get into the 3D grid, I have to give hats off to Daniel Christev that's pushed me in this direction. He didn't know that his work 3 or 4 years ago would just become so obsessive for me. But as we start to build lines between this data and control it, this is just 3 examples of how I can take the data of a gridded cube with points all through it, X, Y, Z, how we can lay hold of the data in each one and have total and utter control. I mean, I am loving this. I am just insane thinking about this. I don't even know where to go with this. But the power of it is incredible. So let's turn off this rotation. Let's take a look at the object, what I'm doing, how I'm gathering data. Look at what's being gathered there. I mean, that's insane to think that I've made this pattern of geometry by just jumping into simple Grasshopper tools, and then I've left these ones just to show the power of using it. So let's take off these. Let's take this off here, ungroup. Let's put this here. And let's go into the top portion of this, only viewing what we want to see, I think. So that should work. And we'll put on the visualization here. That might help. Maybe. I don't know. So we're going to leave this for a second, shaded. And what I've done, and I shouldn't leave this because I had it set up so well, but I guess I will. I have gone in and made a range of points. That's it. And I grafted it. Everybody's familiar with that. But I put it through a graph mapper uh, to move the geometry so I can see what's happening by ABC or XYZ or however you want to think about that. Basically, but I made this set by just lofting that in a set of, I think I moved I'm just moving the geometry up. And then what I'm doing is interpolating it. And that's all I'm doing. And you can flip matrices, and that works well with XY, with 2. But when you have 3, it doesn't know how to flip the matrix. It doesn't know if you want to put B into C or B into A or C into A or C into B. So it doesn't know what to do. So what I do is I find the point system of what's actually happening here, and I drew some lines between it. So that was fine. That was just a simple way of using the graph mapper, going in, and I think I just hit create null, and that's exactly what was created because it understood it was 3 dimensions, so it put it into the null pattern for 3 dimensions. So keep an eye on this data. What is being written here? ABC, semicolons, and curly brackets, repeated. Okay, cancel. What we're going to do is then go in and say, well, what happens when I grab that geometry again and then do something to the point system? I know I was playing with something here for a second, but maybe I took what I was bringing in as that geometry. You'll see. That's the lofting of it going through this tool. So if I go into here and loft it that way, I'm going to end up with basically the same geometries as I go into that. Whether I use that one, if I plug that through the mapper, I think that's exactly what I did. If I plug that one in, what's the last one I plugged in? Let me just see which one I've got going to it. The mapper here should be this one I'm playing with right now. But if we plug this one in, you'd see we get that geometry the same, and the same by just changing the I pattern into A, B, and C positions. But what I want you to notice is the trees look different. So if I plug, maybe I should just move this over. If I plug I into the C area, I'm going to end up with this geometry. It's going to put all the items on the C branch. If I plug it in and put all the items on the B branch, it's going to look like that. And if I put all the items on the A branch, just have to follow this data down here, it's going to look like that again. It's going to go back to looking what it was. So you have control of putting the items on each branch of information. Now think about that as a classroom in different schools, different classrooms in a school, different aisles and rows in each column, and different students in each of those rows. So where do you want the items to sit? What are you looking at when you do this? You can use the analogy of seeds in apples, on branches, on trees, in a field, in rows, and that's one that kind of works, but I don't like to use the tree example. I like to use something different. What happens when I take the geometry and actually start to pull this geometry in, which I'm adding to C, I'm adding to B, and I'm not adding to A. I actually decided to move use the same line portion of moving the indices into C. And what happens with that is the data trees, if I took them all, if I grabbed an example of these, you'll find that these data trees look the same, which is fine, and they're coming out, but the lines between them as I go, like I'm creating lines between these 2 points, and I've decided to go back to the initial points, which were these, all of them, and say just map them to this series of points, like the move points that were in here that were understood. So I draw a line between all those, and I have control of, look at that direction. That's not x, y, that's x. That's it's like a it's not like going this way for x, y. It's joining those lines perpendicular to that. So those guys can be made into beautiful little patterns of horizontal lines. What happens when I put the data in and add a plus to B is I end up with this incredible pattern. And if I do the A, if I just leave it the way I initially had it, I'll have the verticals. So I have the verticals, I have the horizontals, and then this pattern is when I put all the indices, when I added one to the middle group and offset it. Then it's like, what do I do with that data? Well, it's a good way to visualize it just with lines. And what a great pattern. And if you look at those, they're separate. It's not a graph like you've ever been used to. That's incredible geometry to think of building something. And I don't know where to begin with that or end with that. I don't know how to stress how incredible that seems to me, like a sense of data. And it gets a little congested when you start to try and see the point numbers and everything you're doing. Turn all that off. Leave this highlight of the one on. And simply take a look at what you've actually managed to geometrically influence through the Pathmapper. Go in, find patterns you never would have in the 3 dimensions that you never would have experienced through flipping data and dealing in 2 dimensions. And I'll throw it back on as a turntable, even though it is a pretty wild thing to wrestle. You kind of got to go on this side by zooming in here, and then when it's far away, you got to zoom out on the far side. So I've tried to negotiate. It's like flying an airplane here. So it's over here. I'll try and zoom in. And I've had trouble just managing to keep a hold of that thing. But I do find it's just incredible piece of geometry that I'm starting to visualize the power of these control over the paths and the item lists that I put on which path node. Like, I don't know what to think of those little dots as. I think of them as like sound nodes when things come together. So, because I don't have instruction on this and I have to interpret it through what I've learned in life, I'm going to do things like an artist through my craft and where I came from that might be different from an engineer or a programmer. But I know any artist laying hold of this would do completely different things. We'd never end up with the same iterations or the same method. And I think art is about methodology and defining that for yourself, what that means to be certain things. So as that's far away, I'll zoom out. As it's close, I'll zoom in. And that's kind of how I center it. Fun little tool. I mean, I've got too much data going in here. Nice little script to play with. I'm going to start with that, but those are as infinite as you want to extend them. I mean, you just keep going. I'm so excited by this. Like, if you can't tell by my videos, there's going to be this heightened excitement as to what I want to do and what possibly could happen. Bring that out and scan in here. I just want to find another pattern. Like, it's not much. I'm literally playing with simple letters and numbers the way that I was kind of bored in algebra. And I saw that apply to computer science. I didn't know what the computer was for, but what a way to grab. And this is just piped lines. This is not even meshes or objects or data or surfaces. Like, this is nothing. It is letters influencing geometry. So this is really getting into, I guess, the algebra, what the power of this is. So we'll see where it goes. I have no idea where this is going and where the application could be to tile work, to architecture, to sculpture, to building, to fabrication. I am digitally modeling. I am becoming a digital sculptor. Thanks very much for watching the series.